Well, hello, I'm Josh, and I'm back once again with another great film to tell you about. And as promised, this is a much more traditional Christmas film than the last one I covered, Lady in the Lake, but it does have an interesting connection to the film noir genre. That being the casting of Robert Mitchum in the unusual role of a toy salesman, but more on that later. I'm talking about Don Hartman's 1949 Christmas classic, Holiday Affair. Holiday Affair follows Connie Ennis, who after losing her husband in World War II, makes ends meet for her and her son Timmy as a comparative shopper, buying expensive gifts for rival stores to help them make comparative prices. She has a boyfriend named Carl, a friendly lawyer who she likes but isn't sure she's ready to marry. But when she meets Steve, a charming toy salesman who she's become quite fond of, much more so than she'd like to admit, her world is turned upside down and she must choose which to pursue, stability or happiness. So as I said, this is a pretty unusual film for Robert Mitchum, who after getting his first big break in William Wellman's The Story of G.I. Joe, he quickly became a staple in war movies and hard-boiled detective films like Out of the Past, and would later return to the genre in the 70s to play Philip Marlowe in Farewell My Lovely and The Big Sleep, not to mention the villainous Harry Powell in one of my all-time favorites, The Night of the Hunter. So that being said, you would think if he were in a Christmas film it would be much more like Lady in the Lake, but by 1949 Mitchum had gotten himself into some trouble. He had just finished serving a stint in prison on a possession of marijuana charge, so as a way of cleaning up his image, RKO owner Howard Hughes had Mitchum star in this film. And so given that reason, I'm always surprised with how well this film turned out. And one of the things I like about this film is that there are really no bad guys in it. I mean, it would be really easy for Wendell Corey's character to be a big jerk so that the choice can just be simplified down that Carl has more money and security while Steve is poor but a better person. But this film never really takes the obvious direction, and I think that is one of the reasons why it's held up after all these years. In fact, if anything, it's way more popular now than it was back then. Having been sort of revived through annual showings on TCM, this once considered Christmas anomaly has pretty much become a bona fide Christmas classic. I can see how this could have slipped through the cracks when it came out, as it's a very small sort of unassuming film that really just knows what it is and tries to be the best of that kind of film that it can be. And I think that's why people who have seen it love it so much. It's such a warm and genuine film that could have easily been sappy and overly dramatic. And based on the description alone, a woman torn between choosing two men sounds like pretty much every other rom-com Hallmark movie ever made. So I think it's no mistake that this film has become as popular as it has been in recent years, rather than being sort of grandfathered in as an accepted classic. I mean, to start, the script, which was based on John D. Weaver's story, Christmas Gift, is very well written by Isabel Leonard, and though I can't speak for how accurate it was to the book, she does a great job of taking many of these, at least now very common movie trends, and kind of turning them on their heads, but still in a very genuine way. She's not just subverting your expectations to subvert them, but once you think you know where the story's going and you start to sense the common tropes for a scene, the film often goes in a different direction. And oddly enough, the director on this film, Don Hartman, was also a writer who wrote a number of the Hope and Crosby Road pictures, as well as the sequel to Here Comes Mr. Jordan called Down to Earth. But now for the actors, and now I know I've talked a bit about Robert Mitchum being in this film already, as he's of course one of the real highlights of it, and I'm sure given the types of films he would usually be in, this would have likely appeared to be a lesser picture of his, but he really gives a great performance in it. Particularly in the scenes with the young Gordon Gebert who plays Timmy, he is surprisingly warm and fatherly. Leigh later said that despite his cool and carefree reputation, Mitchum really worked a lot harder than he let on, and he always came to set well prepared and knowing all of his lines. And so I think this film is actually a pretty good showcase of his work ethic. Leigh is of course another highlight of this film, as most people nowadays probably know her from Psycho as well as being the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, but she was a great actress in her day and appeared in some other very iconic films like The Manchurian Candidate and one of my favorites, Touch of Evil. But this film came very early on in her career, only a couple years after she started acting. but you really wouldn't know it because she gives such a wonderful performance here. And Gordon Gebert is great as the young Timmy Ennis. Child actors can often be sort of hit or miss, so it's always great to see when they knock it out of the park, and he certainly does here. And Wendell Corey, probably best known as being the friend in Rear Window, also does a great job as the lawyer Carl Davis, who really has the thankless job of being the nice suitor of Connie, though not being too nice, so when Mitchum comes in, it still has to be a decently tough decision as to who Connie should go with. It's a pretty subtle and complicated thing to pull off, but he does it wonderfully and becomes a great addition to the film. And finally, I must add that classic character actor Harry Morgan is also here as the police lieutenant who hears and tries to straighten out the whole mess at the end, almost like Miracle on 34th Street. And though his role is pretty small, he's just one of those great actors who pops up in various films and TV shows from time to time, and I'm always happy to see him. So in short, though not a decade-spanning classic like It's a Wonderful Life or a big VistaVision musical like White Christmas, I feel that Holiday Affair is instead one of those Christmas movies like It Happened on Fifth Avenue that has kind of been forgotten about by the larger public, but regarded as a true Christmas classic to anyone who has seen it. And so if you like to watch Holiday Affair, it's available to rent or buy from all the usual places online, and can be bought physically quite easily on DVD or Blu-ray. And you may even find it in a holiday 4-pack that TCM does, as like I said, this film has kind of become an annual tradition on that channel. But the Blu-ray that I have is here from Warner Archive, and it looks excellent and is easily the best way to watch it nowadays. But now for my comment question, and I am wondering, what are some of your favorite underrated or underseen Christmas films? Though as I said, not as well known as some of the more obvious Christmas movies, Holiday Affair is quite beloved by those who have seen it. So I'm wondering, what are some other Christmas films that you love to watch every year that may not be one of the obvious choices? Put your favorites in the comment section down below and start discussing. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to see some more of these. Remember to keep watching movies and have a Merry Christmas.
Mom, what are you thinking about?
Well, since your plans are all made, maybe I ought to start thinking about my future. Come on, young man, you and I have things to do right now.